Evening! Welcome to the Tuesday evening AquaStax hour with me, Long Steve. Thank you for coming along today and watching this, or maybe watching this another day because there's nobody here just at this moment. So, it is Tuesday evening, it's the 7th of March. March already, I think I've probably said that the last couple of streams. Just before 8 o'clock, my regular Tuesday evening stream. In case anybody wonders, I also stream on a Thursday afternoon, UK time at 3 PM. Although in a couple of weeks' time that may be changing. I may not be able to do Thursday afternoons going forwards after this month, but I will let you know in advance. Today I've been playing around with my hat again. I now have an extra hat function which allows it to make flashy lights when anybody makes a chat in the chat stream. Let me just type something in. Testing the hat. See chatter. I shall watch my monitor on the side here. There it goes. Yes, makes a chattering hat type chatter noise. I'm also using my other microphone today. Interesting thing, I listened to my stream back, or I watched it back from a couple of days ago, and I noticed an interesting electronic whine when my hat powered up and the lights came on. And I normally have a mic that sits on my face. And I think it was picking up something in the hat. So I'm using my my lapel mic stuck to my front today. Hope it sounds okay still. I will try and speak clearly and loud enough for it. The mic monitor says it's definitely picking things up. So we shall get back to where we were. I think I managed to do quite a reasonable amount of functional work last time and get my app, my game, drawing nice looking blocks that were outlined. Yes, and they rotate nicely, so they've got a black outline. Oh, a little bit of a jitter on the outline above the grid there, but that'll probably go away when the grid is removed, because that's really just for testing purposes at the moment. I'm going to continue on with today making the block data in the grid cluster together when it's of the same color. So you'll see that I haven't got any blocks of the same color at the moment. Let's put that one there. Let's put a red one. Actually, these red ones down the bottom, because they're the same color, should all group together into a larger block. So that's what I'm going to work on today. And these blue ones, for example, those two there should slide together. So the gaps in between, or not the gaps, the outlines between the blocks should disappear, and they should be a big solid color. Right, we're going to get straight into looking at this bit of code now. So I know that when a block lands in the grid, the function that's called is insert block into grid. Here it is. And I'm going to just double check that I'm streaming okay. Let's check live coding here. Usually do, but I haven't heard a ping from my phone. It usually sends a tweet. Oh yeah, I'm streaming. Good, right. So it usually sends a tweet when I start streaming. Right. Self.grid.insert block into grid. So that's where we want to go. Jump straight to that. So what happens here is all the block data from the falling block gets inserted into the grid. Is it grid data? Game grid. That's the grid. Right. I'm going to have a sip of tea. And then what happens is the block that corresponds to that falling block just kind of stays on the screen at its place. Insert block into grid, self.block, new random block overwrites self.block, which is interesting actually. I might change that. Let's see. New random block, where is it called? It's called in a couple of places. This is the stick block function. So new random block is called only from stick block, and stick block new random block called self.new block. So that's basically creating a new block, setting it to self.block, setting its position, adding it to the game panel, and also calling setFallingBlock on the grid. Yeah, I'm just concerned that there's a side effect calling this function affects self.block, but I'm going to leave it like it is for now. What that means is the node of the old block at this point here gets left exactly where it was. So that's why we're seeing the blocks in the grid just left there. Right, let's put one there. So that's fine. I could remove them at that point, then they disappear. What I want to kind of do is transfer their ownership to the grid, or do I even, well, there's a couple of options. So one is to transfer the ownership to the grid and then run a function that checks to see if, or as part of the insert block into grid, it checks to see whether or not there's clusters of blocks together, like those blue ones, for example, or those green ones. And then if there is, it creates new blocks from them. I could completely remove the block that's falling and then just let the grid allocate new blocks as they land. That might be one way of doing it. It's probably not an efficient way of doing it, but we can make it more efficient in the future if we want to. I have a feeling that's what I'm probably going to do, thinking about it out loud. What I'm going to do is get the grid to create arbitrary block objects as they land by running a function over the entire grid and basically just creating a load of block nodes. Now, do I want to, I don't want to do it stupidly to start with. What I should do is maintain the blocks that don't change and only look for new clusters where the new block lands, because that's going to be the only changed area. Ignoring breaking blocks for the moment, although I should pay attention to breaking blocks because I will need to implement those in the future. So let's think about how the clustering can work. I suppose I might as well start by just writing the generic clustering routine that runs across the entire grid and works out clusters of blocks and creates them. That way I'll get the logic for creating clusters. Then I can refine it by running it over particular parts of the grid only when a block lands at that certain part, or when I know that a block break has occurred and lots of changes in the grid structure are about to happen. So let's go ahead and look at that first. So in order to visualize that, what I want to do really is start by just removing the block from the grid when it lands, and then going through and writing a function which will go through the entire grid and generate blocks and then render them. So once it generates blocks, it adds them to the scene, and then of course they get rendered because they're block objects with draw nodes. So let's do that. Let's go and so in new block, where it creates a new block, it needs to remove the old block from the grid. So what does it do? Creates a new block and add it to the game panel, also called setFallingBlock as a side effect. Creates a new block, removes the old block, or the old or current, removes the old current falling block. Ooh, what happened there? I hit the down key by accident. A page down. Remove the old current falling block as a side effect. Okay, just also double checking. Yep, my monitor is on the right resolution. So I was setting things up before I started here, and I think maybe the monitor might have been on the wrong resolution. Ah, Wilson 2000, good to see you. A long time no see. It's been a couple of weeks, I think. Hope you're well. Do type something in the chat window because the hat will respond. It doesn't respond if Tim, the bot, types anything. So, just as a brief recap, actually, since you're here, I have now got some nice outline code that draws outlines around my blocks in a nice fashion rather than using the triangles that it has been using. And I'm just about to write some code that generates clusters of blocks within the grid where the blocks of the same color are next to each other. I've kind of described a fairly long-winded process of what I'm going to do, so I won't go over it again. Anyway, let's dive into the code. So I was just about to change this. Remove the old current falling block as a side effect. No, remove the old current falling block and runs actually, that's all it has to do. Remove the old current falling block, autocall set falling block, right. So it's literally a case of self.block.remove from parent. Is that a thing? Oh yes. Clean up true if all actions and callbacks on this node should be removed. Well, I guess so, yes. Let's see what that does. Now, that's probably going to break. Okay. Oh no. New block, of course, gets called first time and there is no block. So if self.block, remove it. Right. So it's going to disappear as soon as it lands. Yep. But it's still there. So the collision detection and the sliding still work. Okay, good. I might leave it as outline there or something like that, just so I know it's still there. That's a remove from parent. Can I do something funky with it, like remove the color? No, we'll leave it for now. So then what I want to do is in grid, as part of insert block into grid, I want a new function that gets run, which effectively generates the clusters. So generate. Ooh, hi Anita, good to see you again. Welcome back. Yay. If you type something in the chat window, the hat responds. I added that recently. I've also done a cool web interface for my hat. It's not publicly available yet, but it will be at some point. So you can control Steve's hat on the web. So I can click on Cylon, and it does the Cylon effect, just like you can type into the chat window. But this is independent of the live coding TV chat. I can do a wipe. The blue, yeah, and we'll clear it. And I can even take the hat offline, and it will recognize it and put it online again, and it will come back online according to my web page. Uses WebSockets, so I'm quite pleased with that. Anyway, so just an aside. So I want to generate clusters. That's basically what it's going to do. So this is my first attempt at clustering. It's not going to be optimized. It's just going to be the logic for running over the game grid and generating block objects based off of the contents of the grid. Afterwards, I'll worry about optimizing it, putting it in the right places, and using it carefully so it doesn't like take up too much space and too much runtime either. So I know I'm going to have to run over the game grid. So do I do it XY or do I just do it incrementing the index? I don't think it matters. I think it's going to be incrementing the index is probably the easiest, so we'll start with that. So, game grid, borrow some of these existing bits of code. So, grid size. Did I increment? Oh, hi, live edge support. Good to see it. Grid size. That's not what I want. I basically want game grid.length, don't I? Game grid.length. I've updated my splash screen so that it now says liveedu.tv and not livecoding.tv. But I haven't upgraded, my channel splash screen, but I haven't upgraded my my intro for when I start streaming yet. I'll do that soon. I also haven't migrated all my videos across to a project. I didn't even know if I have to do that or not. Just got a message from Mohammed, I think it is, saying, have I done that yet? And I kind of haven't. I assumed everything would just keep working as it is, but I'll have a look at the blog post and see if I need to do anything special. Anyway, so game grid.length. Actually, I'll use grid pos, don't I? Which is what I kind of, yeah, I'll probably use that. So let's just have pause. Can I speak up? Yes, I'm using a different mic because I think my hat got some electronic whine, or the mic, my old mic, picked up some electronic whine from my hat, which is very unusual. I can't bump the volume up anymore. I could maybe move the mic slightly closer to my mouth. Right, I'll try and speak clearly. Yeah, it was weird. I listened back to I watched back a previous stream, and every time the hat did something, there was this kind of like whine in the audio. So whether it was my mic picking up, I don't know. Seems much better now. Okay, excellent. I shall make sure I keep speaking clearly. So the grid pause, and so what is the grid? What actually gets stored in the grid pause? Does it store the color? So it stores tile num, shifted up by 24 bits. Then it stores the block grid pos. What's that? Oh, here we go. Game grid. The game grid. This is my comments for my past self. The game grid is a single-dimensional array of ints starting at 0 bottom left. Each entry uses the following bit pattern: tile num, flags. Okay, so I was expecting somewhere in there to be the color, which is a bit awkward. Although I suppose it indirectly references the tile, which has the color in it, doesn't it? So it's tile number. Ah, T1 and T2 are the triangles. Okay, yeah, they're the triangles. Then there are flags. Then there's the tile numbers. Right, that's interesting. Because that's going to be interesting. Yes. Oh, no, it'll work for now. So what I'm doing is, if game grid pos does not equal 0 for a start, so if there's something in the grid position, then we're going to do something with it. What am I going to do? I'm going to create an array of clusters. So clusters. What clusters are yet, I don't know. They're probably going to be objects. which describe blocks, and then we'll go through it again and actually turn them into blocks that can be rendered. But a cluster is going to be all grid, grid cells of the same type. So we've got any grid cell can actually have can reference two blocks in it. So what we want to look at is, let's see if, this is probably going to be this Tuesday night. The code I write on Tuesday night tends to be pretty shabby, and I end up fixing it all up and then making a much better stream on a Thursday afternoon because it's been the end of a long day. So we'll see how far we get today. So if grid pos shifted down by 24 bits and FF, I suppose I could just do this. I don't need a high level F. Oh, hi Creek, good to see you. There's a few people popping in today, it's nice. Actually, it's going to be tile, isn't it? Let's call it tile 1 is going to be that. Tile 2 is going to be shifted down by 16 bits. Now, flags. What I need to do here is make a note in the grid that a particular tile that I'm looking at has been processed by this clustering loop. Because what I'm thinking of doing is making it kind of like walk up, down, left, and right from the current position, so that it can check whether or not there are adjoining tiles of the same type. Having just said that, I wonder if that would make me better off looping over it using X and Y. Not sure, it doesn't really matter. But what I want to do is probably add some flags that let me figure this out. So we've got these collision flags. Here we are, flags shifted up by 16, yeah, so it's going to be shifted down by 8. That's space for flags. That's why I've used shifted up by 8 and 9. So I kind of want cluster, let's see, cluster flag T1. I'm thinking I need to remember if the cluster is the first or second one. Ooh, hi, Holly Hanbadem, good to see you. Hope I pronounced that correctly. And that's going to be 1 shifted up by 10 bits. And then cluster flag T2 is going to be shifted up by 11. So what we want to do is we want to clear all of those in the grid first, because if we're looping over the whole grid, we don't want to start by making sure that we clear those flags. So game grid pos or equal. Okay, where's my? Should be the pipe code. That's what I wanted. Or equals cluster flag T1. Actually, I want and equals. Hang on, I'm going to clear the bits. And equals cluster flag T1 ORed with cluster flag T2. And we want to knot all of that. Basically, that means those 2 bits will be 0 in that flag, in that mask, and then and equals means that all the other bits will remain the same, and those 2 bits will get set to 0 within every entry in game grid. Right. Clear the cluster flags before clear the cluster flags before passing over the grid. Working out clusters. That old comment. Pass over the grid cells. Working out the clusters. Right, so we've got tile 1 and tile 2. And they're actually, I suppose, are tile num1, because they're referencing the tile numbers. And let's put in triangle 1. So that triangle 1 is, oh, excuse me, just about to cough. I'll mute myself when I do that. Right. So tile 1 is the shifted up by 24 and the lower nibble. So shifted up by 24, and then the lower nibble is basically just that. And triangle 2 is the grid shifted down by 4 bits and F. Right. So I've got all my bits of data out of the grid cell that we're at the moment. And now I'm going to want to remind myself of my triangles. And I'm probably going to want to do this. Let's see. So here are my triangles. So I know that if I've got a type 1 triangle in either position, I have to check to the left and down, because there will be adjacent cells. And I also have to check the other cell. Sorry, the other triangle within that cell. Okay, so let's try that. So if triangle num1, so if it's not 0, it's not equal to 0. Oh, I suppose I could do. I'm coding the bits out longhand, but we'll probably refactor into some functions shortly. If it's type 1, well, it's basically just equals 1, isn't it? So what am I checking? I'm checking to see if the tile is the same. Yeah. Current tile. So that's going to be what we're looking at. Let's set it to -1. So if triangle, actually, if we've so I keep flip-flopping as to whether or not I'm going to do certain statements and things. Anyway, so we want to check left and right. Do I want to check left and right at the same time? Okay. I'm confused about my storing 2 different triangles in the same grid cell. Keeps on biting me in the bum, that does. I think that's a bit of a throw of my old code that I kept when I probably shouldn't have. But never mind. I'll try and make it correct. So current tile num. Yeah. So if we haven't got one, does it matter? I'm probably going to want some sort of recursive function, aren't I? Because if I have a recursive function, it can just maybe not. Let's see, generate cluster. I suppose I could add the cell to the cluster. So let's think that clusters are going to be blocks effectively. So a cluster will become a block ultimately. So a cluster has to be a list of grid cells which all contain the same tile number and that are connected in the correct way so that they're next to each other. So I want some way to probably add to cluster. And I'm going to pass it the tile. No, I'm going to pass it the grid pos, maybe. And the current cluster. So current cluster. Okay, yep. So if we put this down in here, current cluster. Type 1 triangle, check down to the left. Well, first of all, we want to do if. So current cluster, let's say current cluster is something like an object. So current cluster, and a particular cluster will only be a tile. So var current tile equals current cluster dot tile. Let's call it tile num. Ooh. Not necessarily sure I want that yet. Current tile num. And then we have if tile num1. So if the grid pos passed in has the same tile number on it, but it's got to be the this is where we got to take into account the particular type. So obviously, if I'm checking a type 1 triangle, it's got to test to the bottom and the left, and on the left-hand side, it's got to check that there's either a type 3 or a type 4 triangle, because they're the only ones that have the right-hand lines. Yes, very similar to what I was doing the other day with my outlining code, actually. I might be able to look at that in a minute and see how it works. Remind myself of the code I only wrote a few days ago. So actually, what I'm going to need, the current cluster grid pos, and I'm also going to need to pass in the current triangle, I suppose. Current triangle. So if current triangle, so the one we're looking at, if it's a 1, then we need to check for a 3 and a 4 if we've come left. So do I need to pass the direction in as well? Maybe I do. Current cluster direction. Current triangle grid pos. Put that afterwards. Check direction. Maybe not. If current triangle equals 1, and direction. Oh, now I've got to have some kind of definitions for up, down, left, and right, haven't I? Do dx, dy. I might just have some constants. Let's just stick some constants in for now. Up equals 0, down equals 1. I'll refactor these out later. Left equals 2, right equals 3. So if current triangle equals 1 and direction equals left, then check for a 3 or a 4. I mean, this is going to end up being very longhand, so we'll see how far we get, and if I still figure that I'm actually going to get somewhere correct, then we'll carry on working it out. So if, oh hi Zorend, good to see you. So current triangle equals 1. Actually, we don't really care, we want to do direction. So if direction, I mean, I'm not going to have to do all the 4 directions and all 4 triangle types, we'll see. If direction equals left, then check for types 3 or 4. Else if direction equals, oh hi Prasmic, good to see it. Direction, so if it's left, so if we've got a type 1 triangle, we're only going left or down. So if its direction equals down, then we need to check for, if it's down, we need to check this one that's got its top edge, which is a 2 or a 3. Check for type 2 or 3. So that kind of works. Else if current triangle equals 2, I suppose I can go through a bit more of the logic just to see what happens. So if it's type 2, then we're going to be checking up or left, aren't we? Direction equals up, and we need to make sure we check for a 1 or a 4, because they have their 1 or 4, because they have their bottom edges. And where are we? Type 2 triangle, checking up or left. If it's left, then I know we've got to check for 3 or 4, because it'll be the same as the other one. Yes. Check for 3 or 4. So if we're going 1 or 2, if we've got 3, then I know we're going to check up and right. And right is going to need to check for 1 or 2, type 1 or type 2. Is that right if I check up? Is type 1 or 4? Yep, 1 or 4. I'm looking at the bottom edges again. And the last one, type 4 is going to be right or down. Let's do that one. Ooh, hi P4 Bilko, good to see you. That's not a perforce command I haven't heard of, is it? All the perforce commands, if you use the perforce source control system, start with P4 as their prefix. So there's P4 commit and P4 reject and other things like that. I haven't heard of P4 Belko though. Also forgotten where I was. Triangle type 4 is right and down. And if it's going right, I know it should be checking for a type 1 or 2, and down is a 2 or 3. So right, yeah, 1 or 2, down is a 2 or 3, right. So that's the high level bit of logic, I think. Whenever current cluster, okay, app tile, current tile num. So we want to check the current. We want to check the tile to the. Let's see, current. We want to check if the tile num is equal to. Actually, first of all, we're going to check if there's a triangle in that position. So we want to do if triangle 1 is equal to type 3, or triangle 1 is equal to type 4, and tile num1. What am I doing? I'm looking at maybe we don't need current tile. I'm thinking we need to check the one to the left. So let's the one to the left is going to be game grid pos -1 notionally, but it's not quite that, is it? Let's see if I've got a method that will get me a grid cell from a index. What have we got? Get grid index position for block collision? No. Get grid index for node. Get grid position for index. Okay, so there's an X and Y. That gets me the X and Y. So we could do that. Block X equals grid pos. And in grid, so that gives me X and Y. So to the left, so I kind of want the grid for, I don't want to actually, I suppose I could, I'm thinking I could write it out in longhand just to, I'm thinking about the grid to the left, the right, the up and the down, and the triangles within those grid positions. But it's quite a lot of just boilerplate code to write. Let's start it and see if anything springs out at me as a way of making it more easy to do. So I suppose so tile num is the current tile, but to the left we want well, I suppose left index is going to equal what's my function for getting a grid position or grid index from an XY position? It's just that, isn't it? It's just Y times blocks Y plus X, but it's got to be the boundaries have to be checked for. So left index, let's see, set it to -1 if bx is greater than 0 and bx is less than self.blocks wide. Then left index is going to equal by times self.blocks wide plus x -1. So that'll be the index for one cell to the left, or -1 if the x position that we're looking at is currently on the left edge or the right edge. Okay, so I suppose I can do the same for right index. So if bx is greater than actually, it doesn't matter, that could just be bx is greater than 0, isn't it? And this one is just bx has to be less than self.blockswide minus 1. Yeah, because if it equals blocks wide, it'll be the next one along. Right index, and that's going to be x plus 1. Let's write this out. So then we got var above, up index. If by is less than, do we have blocks high? Yes, we do have blocks high. So that's, at the moment, that's the height of the screen. I suppose that'll do. If by is less than self.blocks high minus 1, yeah, because it has to be one lower, and then up index is equal to by plus 1 times self.blockswide plus, it's actually bx, isn't it? Bx. And down index by is greater than 0. So if it's on the first line, 1 or above, then down index would equal by minus 1 times blocks wide plus bx. Right. So now we've got to check the values of the tile numbers at those indexes. And we have to compare them with either tile num1 or tile num2, which is very awkward. What I should probably do is write a function that will check one or the other. That's what I did before, wasn't it? I think if I look in block, let's see, outline, get tile. When did I write the function that gives me an outline? Add block outline, here we are. Yes, I wrote these has triangle functions, which tests whether or not it's a type 1 or type 2. Yeah. So I might borrow that again. Copying and pasting for now, but I'll refactor that later, as is my catchphrase. Right, cell and type. Okay. So what? I don't actually have to worry about storing triangle 1 and 2 now. I can just do has triangle 3 or 4, can't I? Let's get rid of that for the minute because I haven't quite got that far yet. Okay. Add to cluster, grid pause. That's the cell data, isn't it? That's game grid, grid pause, and that's the type. Right. So I suppose that's if has try game grid grid. No, it's not game grid grid pause. It's game grid left index, isn't it? Left index. Direction equals left, and the left index does not equal -1 for a start. has triangle, game grid left index of type 3, or has triangle left index of type 4. So that'll tell me whether or not there's a matching triangle, and then I need to figure out what type it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ignore that bit of data for a moment and just use this logic to build a massive block that matches all the cells within the grid which have landed so far. And if I can render those, that's a good start. Then I can worry about the colors and the actual linking of ones of the correct type. So all this will do is walk over the grid data and find me all the filled in blocks, and also hopefully do something like store that data. So that's the check the 3 and 4. So this one is if direction equals down and down index does not equal -1. Then has triangle game grid down index of 2 and 3. 2 and 3. Right. What I want to do when it hits something with that correct triangle in, I want it to just basically add the current grid pos to, let's just add the grid pos to the cluster array, and that will, let's see, I'll just store it, won't I? Let's store a big list of grid positions that have tiles in them for now, or the grid positions, and then I'll think about what to do with it next. So clusters is an array. I'm thinking of current cluster.tilenum. I don't even think I need that at the moment, do I? So I don't need triangle 1 and 2. Do I want to move to the left? So I want to add it to the left. So I actually want to call add. I want to call add to cluster on the left index, and at the same time add the current position to the clusters. Let's not worry about that. Do I even need current triangle? I don't think I do, because what I'm doing is I'm passing in the new grid position and the direction we're going, or should I pass in the direction we've come from? Now I'm getting confused as to exactly how the recursion is going to work. So it's too late at night for doing recursive functions, that's for sure. 10 to 9. So what do I want to do? I want to see, I've got current triangle there, but I've just removed it. See, what do I pass in? I'm thinking I need to recurse here. Well, let's do actually the add to cluster should check the current tile, current grid pos against the parameters passed in, and if they match, add it. And then based on what the details of the current cell are at that point, move on and call add to cluster in the directions. Yeah, so I'm probably doing this wrong, because I'm passing in the left and right. I still need the left, right, up and down because I want to move to different directions. But current triangle is what's being checked at in a position. Do I need the direction? Yes, because that's the current triangle, and the direction should be where we've come from. I'm also wondering about X and Y. Might be better off to loop over X and Y positions and avoid all this maths. Yeah, let's try. I mean, it's perfectly good to write a bunch of code and realize that it's wrong and chuck it away again. I'm not ashamed of doing that. Let's think about, I think this roughly is the right high level logic. But I'll get rid of that for the minute. Check for type 3 or 4. So just that bit there, but the rest I'm not sure of yet. What I would normally, let's see, what would I normally do? I would start at a given cell, so current triangle, direction, which could be -1 for no direction. I suppose that's the first call, isn't it? So add to cluster on the first grid pos. Let's loop over X and Y like we do up here. See if that makes, see if I have any, my brain can work it out slightly better if I do that. Also the grid cells working out clusters. So there you go, insert back into grid pos. Right. And basically it's if the cluster flags have been set. So if this bit up here, game grid pos and cluster flag 1 and 2 does not equal 0. So if those flags, no, if it equals 0, yeah, if those flags haven't been set yet, then we know that this particular position hasn't been included in an existing cluster. So what we do is we call add to cluster current triangle. Actually, there's two things we should do. If game grid pos does not equal 0, and that so if there's data in the grid at that point, and that point hasn't, my plan is to set those flags when the add to cluster has gone through a particular grid pos. If those are 0, then we have to think about it. Then we add to cluster, we might as well do current triangle -1, direction -1, and what's my add to cluster, and then we're passing the grid pos, right? So that kind of kicks off the recursion. So the point of that is it will start at grid pos and fan out in all the directions until it finds grouping all of the cells together. So current triangle direction grid pos. So what I should probably do is need to check for direction -1, because that's going to be equals minus, yeah, -1 means always do it. We're starting at that point. Oh, I suppose I could special case that. Let's see, maybe I should just comment some of this stuff now. So I'm thinking about it. I was also going to pass in x and y, wasn't I? Grid pos, x and y. I don't really need grid pos because it can be worked out. So let's pass in x and y. Now I don't need to worry about this, do I? I can just use x. Don't need bx and by. It doesn't actually change the amount of code very much. So current triangle, what I'm doing there is I'm passing in -1. See, I'm going to check for the type 2 or 3 direction equals left. Right, so use -1 to indicate we don't want to check in that direction. Yep. What? Then check the triangles at the current grid position based on the direction of entry to see if we want to recurse in the given recurse off in that direction due to a matching adjacent triangle. So that's what we want to do. We want to this checks to see whether or not we want to move off in different directions. But prior to all of that, we want to check if tile num 1 or 2 matches a triangle in the current cell. So if current triangle does not equal -1, that's kind of that's the start position. So that's the entry point. Current triangle is -1. We basically do everything. Oh, welcome back, Wilson 2000. Did you get booted out there or something? I wonder if Live Edu dropped some connections, or whether you just left. Both you and Anita disappeared at the same time, so I thought maybe some connection had got dropped. So current triangle is -1. This is the kind of entry point. Should fan out in appropriate directions. But of course, if the direction comes in from one, say it comes in from the right, we don't want to go out back to the other way, but current direction and direction equals -1. Just made a comment about that being the sort of entry point into the code. Also, what I should do at this point is, I suppose I can flag put the cluster flag in place. Okay, set the cluster flags as having been tested, so we don't move back through this cell. So we've got it's self.gameGrid as well, isn't it? Must remember that. Oh no, we're okay, it is GameGrid. GameGrid grid pos or equals. So I'll just do that for the moment. We should also bail out if the cluster flags are already set. Although, already set, yes. If so, similar test to down here. Or there's nothing in the cell. Yes. If GameGrid grid positive does not equal 0, or out to do that, or GameGrid and cluster flags 1 and 2 equals, I could say does not equal 0 there. That means that they'll be set. I'll wait for now. So this is simply a case of return, isn't it? Say bailout end. Oh, that's no good, is it? I've got to do that before I return. Yeah, we should do that there. Bailout if the recursion, bailout invocation if the cluster flags I've already set or there's nothing in the cell. Set the flag so we don't move back through. And then recurse in current triangle. I'm not actually testing current triangle. I am testing current triangle. I think I need to reverse all of these directions, but check for type 3 or 4. Another cup of tea. I'm almost run out of tea today. Usually I don't run out of tea. I end up just making it go cold and finishing off after the stream. But today I've been drinking it because I've been trying to think about what I'm doing. And the occasional sip helps. Helps get the brain cells going. I'm also discovering that wearing this hat is quite hot, actually. Maybe it's constricting my head as well. I might have to see if I can loosen it a little bit. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's see, 9:10. I'm close to calling it a night, even though I haven't actually got anything to test. I might as well just make sure that JS Hint is happy on a few of these things. Seems okay there. Grid reloaded. I don't expect it's going to do much at the moment. It's just going to go back and put see if it's still working, whether I've got something broken. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll tidy it up so it works. Grid size is not defined, 922. And then call it a night because I'm not going anywhere very fast at the moment. I need to think about what I want to do a bit better. That's not grid size, it's blocks wide times blocks high, isn't it? Grid size. Self.blocks high and self.blocks wide. Okay, but it's still doing it. Oh, it's not broken. I hope it's running over this code. Let's just see. I'll just put some call trace function in add to cluster. Log add to cluster x comma y. Right, so it's calling add to cluster on those two cells. Good. Add to cluster 0, 0, 1, 1. Okay, so it's actually kind of getting the right groups of cells. So add to cluster is running over the various indexes or the positions in the grid. As I do stuff, it should probably find 2 clusters there. Link them together a bit. Okay, so that's definitely doing things. Whether obviously the logic isn't there, it isn't completed yet. There's no actual setting of any data. Do I want to try recursing down into the function? I don't at the moment. I don't think I'll be able to get that working just yet. It's a bit of a start of a function. Add to cluster. So I'm going to comment this. This will group, or it will make, let's say, fill out the clusters array with groups of cells that correspond to blocks, or to the clusters of the same size. So once I've got a set of clusters, basically a cluster will be every group of grid cells that are the same color. So that purple block will be one cluster. So I shall have one cluster that contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 grid cells in it, and now 12 grid cells, and so on. And which cells they actually are, then I can go about turning that cluster into a block by looking at the extent. So I look at the left and right edges and the top and bottom edges, make a block structure that's a bit like my already defined blocks down here. So numbers that look like that, pulling that straight out of the grid data and referencing whichever tile it's originally come from, so the colors are correct. That way I can make a tile. I won't need rotations because these clusters are never going to be rotated, they're only ever going to be dropped down, and then I can start doing stuff with them. But at the moment this isn't doing anything, but it hopefully will do when I actually get to start the recursion. That's the end of the function, isn't it? It's just put a semicolon there so I can get it right. I don't know if these hash triangle is defined but never used. Oh yes, so now it's tile 1 and 2, grid pos is already defined. Oh, is it? Okay. Yes, there it is. Grid pos. Clusters is defined but never used. So those are not defined but not used, but that's fine. They'll be used at some point in the future. So it's just defined but not used. Right. I will stick that into GitHub, just because I always do it at the end of each stream, but it's not currently working. So actually, I'll make a comment here as well. I should make a new branch for this, and then do all my commits on a new branch, and then merge that into the main when I'm done. But since it's only me making code changes at the moment, I'll just do it incrementally. If I was working with other people, then I would create a new branch, submit my code on that, and then once it's all working, merge it into the main branch. But as it is, I'll leave it like it is for now. First attempt at writing the clustering code. Grid dot, what did I call it? generateClusters. First attempt at writing the grid clustering code. Grid.generateClusters. Not working yet, but have a rough, very rough. Okay, commit and push that. Hopefully on Thursday. It seems to be becoming a pattern. I fumble around a bit and write some shabby code on a Tuesday night, and then on Thursday, when I'm much more awake and alert, I tidy it all up and make it work properly. So that's not a bad way to go about doing things. At least I'm doing 2 streams a week. Anyway, that's all done for today. Apologies for not having anything interesting or fantastic to see at the end of today's stream compared to where I was at the start. But there's been a bit of code written. And I will be back on Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Thanks Wilson2000 for watching and coming and going today. Hope you're well, and see you again soon. Let's see, do I want to do anything else before I leave? Oh, I might chat to the hat. Is it still working? Yay, it's still working. If there was lots of chat going on, then the hat would be flashing away like mad. And I can also use my hat control. Let's have a rainbow. There we go, rainbow. I will make the hat control page available on AquaStax.com at some point soon. Oh, you can also have lots of different colors, not just the standard few. And if I take my hat offline, then it'll tell me, which is really cool. But I won't do that now. Okay, that's it for me tonight. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you again on Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Cheerio.